Hi again, this is Peter. This video we're going to be looking at images and P5.js. So this is going to be a really important tutorial for a lot of you. So we've gone through fonts, which would also be important. But let's say you wanted to hand generate your own text, which I would highly recommend for your own styles. You'll be using a lot of images that you might have scanned or created in other digital software. Some of you might be using the shape functions that we've looked at. You might be interested in that, but you don't have to. You can use images. So this is going to be a really important one for a lot of you. So go over it a couple of times if there's stuff that hasn't really kind of come straight across. But getting started with images, I'm just going to start back with the same file that we were working on in the font and text video. Once again, you can download this from the GitHub page. There'll be a link in the description. You could also just work off what you did for that video. So I've already kind of downloaded some assets for this particular example. I'm just going to hit spacebar on a few of them. So, sorry, this is only the one I'm going to be using. This is not my copyright. I've got a website here that I just want to make sure I refer to, which is the Victorian Royal Botanic Garden. For education purposes, I hope I can use this, but I will be contacting them to make sure that's okay, given the situation. Usually in a classroom it would be fine, but just to keep in mind that the copyright is not mine for this image. So I'm using Murnong, which unfortunately we might not have that much time in this video to talk about, but Murnong is an indigenous plant that was all around the east and south coast of Australia that I know of the continent, and it was like a yam that was used as a food source. I say was, it's still a thing, it's still here with us, it still is used as a food source. People eat it. It's starting to become more popular in fine dining cuisine, where people are interested in celebrating indigenous foods. But for me personally, it's got a connection because my mother used to go with her father down the street where we lived in Wadawurrung country in what's called Gladesville, and they'd dig up this by the river and wash it in the creek and eat it. My mum's told me a story about how it tasted like coconut, and she was only a little girl and she remembers it really vividly. So for me, it's like also something that's close to me as an image. So I just wanted to share a bit of that. And unfortunately, I don't have much more time in the video to talk about it. But if you wanted to ask me about some of my stories, I'm happy to talk to you about those as well. But for the purposes of this coding experience, it's just an image that we're going to work with. And in your situation, these would be your images that you've created. So one first thing I want to say is that with images, it's really important to, with web development at least, is to work around the size that you would want it shown. So you don't want to have a huge image file and then resize it in code, because you're going to be loading that huge image into your web browser, and that slows down people's experiences. So remembering we have to preload all of our files, and there's no point kind of having a higher resolution image if we're not going to be utilizing that resolution. So definitely want you to be opening your images in Photoshop, resizing them to the maximum size you'll be using inside of your code. So I've done that with this image. So once you've done that, you put that in the assets folder. So right now you can see that I'm inside images fonts from the last exercise, created the assets folder in there, and then I've dropped in the Murnong.jpg image that I've gotten from the Botanical Gardens and resized that in Photoshop. So it's pretty much the same process. We create a variable in our code, and we then give it a name. So I'm going to say Murnong image. And inside of the preload function, because it's a file, we want to load it before the website starts up. We're going to use the name of the image, the variable we've created, and we've got another function very similar to the last one we've looked at for fonts, but it's called load image. So the load image function pretty much the exact same thing. We can just, at its most minimum, give it a path name. So that path name is assets, because we want to look in the assets folder, and then we give it the file name. So I go back here. I'm just going to type it out, but remember, if you want to be safe, you can copy and paste that from the folder. But it's mernong.jpg. Great, and I'm going to hit save. Cool, so I'm just going to say I've done a couple of changes. I've changed it to a white background from the last one, and I've made the fill black, so our text is black. I've got our text still there from the last video saying hello there, animating across. Cool, so to draw an image, it's pretty simple. We just create the image function, and at its most basic, again, it takes 3 variables. So the first variable is, 3 parameters. The first parameter is the variable our image is stored in, so that's the mernong image variable. And the next 2 is the x and the y. Okay, so let's say we create that at 0, 0. Hit save. Cool. So that's pretty much all we need to do to get the image inside of our code here. But notice here as this hello there goes across, the text keeps going across there. So if you want your image to be the size of the background, it is important that your screen size and your image size are the same, of course. So I'm going to show you the size of this image. So I go back to my files, click on the mernong JPEG, I hit Command I on Mac for my computer, and it'll give me the dimensions here, hopefully. In the more info, no, oh dear, bit of a fail here. It usually does. Okay. All right. Maybe I can just open this with Photoshop. And then we can find out. But for now, I'm not going to waste too much time in this video with that. I'm going to come back to my code. So if you look back at here, you would set the image size and the background size to be the same. Yeah, cool. But with images, it's the same. Here we go. Oh, this is awkward. Okay. With images, the XY position here, so X and Y, the X and Y, they represent the top left-hand corner of our image. Okay, so just like rectangles by default is the top left-hand corner, our images are also. So just keep that in mind when you're positioning your images. You can animate images just like you could animate text and shape by using the variables. The next thing I want to show you is you can start to layer images as well. So if I wanted to, I could say draw another image, which is the same image, and put that on top of this image. But I'm going to make it 100 across on the x-axis. So notice here that this is the underneath image and that's the over the top image. Now this isn't really very helpful because they're both the same image, but let's say you wanted to create one image of the mernong, but then have an image of like an insect that you want to fly around and sit on the mernong or something like that. You could create the mernong as the base image, and then as the second image you could have the bee or whatever it is, and then the bee would be positioned and animate over the top of this. I'm going to show you another example of that now. So instead of having this mernong image here, the JPEG, I'm going to load 2 other images in. So back to my folder, you'll notice that there's a mernong top and a mernong bottom in my assets folder. So what I've done here, and you might be able to have a closer look at this, is I've taken this into Photoshop and I've selected these parts of the image and I've cut them out of the image and place them back in their exact same spot and put them as two different PNGs. So it's hard to see right now, but you'll notice that there's an area here where these were cut out from, and they're actually still in the same spot, but just on a separate image. So we'll have a Murnong bottom, which will show first, and then a Murnong top. And they both are PNGs, so I've cut out the white and made it transparent. So you can start to have things moving behind these parts of the image, and you start to layer PNGs on top of each other. By doing that technique, you can then have some really interesting things like words weaving in between and so on. So I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So instead of having just one Murnong image, I'm going to say Murnong bottom and create a variable called Murnong top. Then I'm going to have to load those into here. So I'm not using this Murnong JPEG anymore. I'm going to be using Murnong here bottom instead, and load the Murnong bottom.png. And then I'm going to create a Murnong top. So I can just copy that line and change this to top, and then change this to top. And then when I draw the image, I'm going to create the Murnong bottom. Oops. And then I'm going to draw the Murnong top. I'll save that and I'll come back to my code. Notice here that this is the top and the bottom parts that are separated. So I can just comment out the bottom part and save that for you. You'll see that that's just the top part, and the same goes for if I comment out the top part, and you can see that that's gone. Sorry, I should move this out of the way. Okay, so the reason we're going to do this is I want to show you how to layer things. So first off is I want to make this text move here. So I need to move it down on the y-axis. You know what, I'm actually going to remove some of this text. I'm just going to use the italic text, and I'm going to write in Murnong. Okay, and I'm going to make it so it's further down. All right. So remembering is, again, this part here is what is cut out, and I want this Murnong to move through there. So right now I've got the bottom image, I'm thinking of our layers, then the top image, and then the text. Okay, so our text is actually going across the top here. I can move my text, which is all of this 3 here. I can cut it, and I can put it in between these two parts, so in the sandwich kind of area there. So what's going to happen is, hopefully when I save it, the text is going to go between this and this. Okay, I'll slow it down a little bit so it's a bit easier to see, and I'll make the starting point off the screen. So I'm going to say -100. So our text is moving a little slower here, and it's starting off further to the left. And notice now as our text goes through, it actually cuts behind that and starts to wrap in. If I wanted to, I could take the little bits of white out there as well, which would be a bit better, but you can still see that effect, which is quite nice. So I would recommend playing with your images. I think we can go a bit further down here as well. Let's say 95, a bit faster, faster again. Yeah, we're going behind that little lily bit there. So loading the images is the same, animating the images can be the same as well, and thinking about a technique of layering your images and your text so you have things moving behind other things. Using PNGs, using transparencies is a good way to start to build up some really interesting scenes. And next up, we're going to actually be showing you how to use the mouse coordinates to draw things. So we're going to be introducing you to two variables called mouse x and mouse y. And so a little sneak peek is I can draw this Murnong word at my mouse and start to have things interact with the mouse. Cool. And so thanks so much for the video. Remember, if you have any issues, please bring them up in the Zoom meetings, or send me an email or put a post in the team. All right, thanks so much.